One day in 1939, a man, which you will see later, called Adolf Hitler, broke out war because he actually invaded Poland, and there's some of his particular army of the German army. Also, we had of the German aircraft, and they would obviously bomb our main big city, London, day and night. And when the bombers came over, we heard this air raid siren, which used to indicate to the public of London that the planes are now coming over. And of course, they would then rush down to the air raid shelters to actually take cover, and that would be a good idea because when the bombs were hitting the buildings, they could actually escape those bombs and very easily be safe and have songs and be happy, have cups of tea if they needed to get sleep, because obviously they could do just about everything they could do at home, but it would be far safer and it would be far better for them. But the problem was with the food, you had to have their rationing, because of the rationing you had to have lower amounts of tea, coffee, cheese, lard, bacon, milk, and even down to toilet paper. And of course during World War II, when the British Army were fighting, and of course the Royal Air Force, there used to be one particular, and there's Hitler by the way, but as we're going into Woodley, there used to be one particular chap who did lose his legs in the war, Sir Douglas Bardo, and of course he had many victories throughout the war itself. And Battle of Britain. There's the Woodley Aerodrome where he actually worked. We will be looking at Woodley Aerodrome or Airfield in more greater detail. There's the factory on the left hand side of the airfield, and towards the right hand side, and there's a picture of the actual blocks and buildings that were there, and we'll have a look at all the streets and all that in a moment to that. And there's the right hand side or the middle of it to indicate there was more buildings towards the right hand side. We're not going to go into those buildings, and of course there's a new map of the big black spot which is for the factory, and a little black spot for the actual hangar. This is Henley Road with Tappins Lane, as you can see with the gate on the left. And if we slightly move to the right, we can then see where the aerodrome would have been, because that would have been the area of the hangar. So that's the hangar area. Then we can move further down and we're still at the airfield itself. But obviously we've got to keep moving down and moving down and moving down, and this is obviously what it looks like today, because in 1931 that would have been the airfield itself, but due to development plans and building and stuff like that, it has changed into all this new landscape and stuff like that, which is good. But yeah, in 1931 what you're seeing now would have been the airfield itself. And of course as we come down to the other end of the road where the actual roundabout is, that roundabout wouldn't have been there, like that road wouldn't have been there neither, because it's still got the airfield or the field that was owned by 11 Elms. So all of this really is brand spanking new, built years ago. And yeah, just look at that airfield where it would have been and how like big it would have been, and yet Sir Douglas Bardo and other RAF crew members were working there, probably 8 until 5, and then some of them 5 until whenever. Then they're like clubhouse and quarters and managers mess and stuff like that. And yeah, it must have been a good sort of time and era. That's still part of the airfield that you're seeing, even though it's new, I must admit. And yeah, we're coming down to the roundabout now, which obviously the roundabout wouldn't have actually been there, because like I say, that would have just, see, there's the roundabout, and then you would have had the actual airfield to your left, because obviously, yeah, it would have turned right into the other Henley Road, and that's the way it would have went. So we turn right into the other area, because that down towards the head of us would have been like all new stuff. So yeah, we're turning right into Henley Road, which may have had a name change, but it's Henley Road 1931 we're pronouncing. And again, yes, the airfield would have been on the left-hand side. So you're still seeing, even though the houses are there, the actual airfield itself, which used to be known as RAF Woodley or the RAF Reading Aerodrome, which continues all the way down to the other end, Loddon Bridge Road. And we will be able to see the factory pretty soon, because it is still, believe it or not, got another type of factory on, which we're just coming up to, because the actual factory would have been there where this like new one exists. So just in a second or two we will come to that. So you still got part of the airfield there, and then we will be coming to the actual place of the factory, like I said, where the Moles Aircraft Limited would have built all the aircrafts, and in with his wife, which we'll see later. So yeah, we're just coming up to the factory now. So you may as well say from now is the factory, and that then goes to Loddon Bridge Road. So here's the factory, and guess what? There's still a factory there. I haven't done enough research to actually say what that factory actually makes, but that is where the actual factory would have been positioned. And then as we come to the roundabout, we obviously got to turn left into Loddon Bridge Road, because then it goes down Loddon Bridge Road. So that's showing the new sort of factory, but that would have been where obviously the old factory would have been, because of indications given earlier, and that was good. Also, with the new building, it does look sort of very good, but that's because obviously it's been redeveloped a couple of times, obviously. So as we come down to Loddon Bridge Road, obviously I'm not sure the roundabout would have been there in 1939. I don't think it actually was by the diagrams, but it may have been. So we'll presume for now that the actual roundabout wouldn't have been there, because we're just coming down to that now. And then we turn left into Loddon Bridge Road, which we know is definitely like there according to all the maps that I've just shown you. So that's one good thing. I will re-show you again, because obviously then you will get to easily sort of know. because obviously I can, just re-show you the outline of it again with the road names straight after, this showing. So we're coming near to the end of the factory in 1931 also now, but it obviously continues a little bit further on in our video because obviously, it was obviously quite large. That road wouldn't have been there because obviously it weren't built like that originally in 1931, because obviously it just continued like it has just there and went down into Loddon Bridge Road, which wouldn't have had a roundabout in at all, because obviously in 1930 when it would have been looking like different. So that's good. And then as we turn left into Loddon Bridge Road, we have to then proceed down the London Bridge Road, which we are going to do very, very shortly. Here we come. Yep, we're just coming down to the left-hand turn for London Bridge Road, so we can actually, go down there. Remember, the factory would have went down to near to the end anyway, and then we turn left, literally down London Bridge road now, which is why I've photographed it this way to, slowly go into Loddon Bridge Road for you, and, come out where we should, aim to be, because that would have been the, obviously, what would it have been, the left-hand side of the factory, and then it would have went down into the actual part of the field which had the actual aircraft on. So as you're coming down, seeing just this like bushy bit, as we could sort of say, that would have been obviously the left hand side of the factory, like coming down Loddon Bridge Road. And then, like I say, it would have came into the little bit of area which should be for the field area, which you can see a side road on your left, as we sort of get down to that point. And of course in 1931 that's what it would have been. So yeah, so looking at the actual landscape at the moment, obviously it is like changed, and you've got all the new roads and stuff like that. Still in Loddon Bridge Road at the moment. Looking at the left hand side part of the factory, and we then turn into the bit of the field which is around about here, and as we then go further down we can then turn left into Coleman's Moor Man's Road, which will be down at the more down towards the bottom, and then we got to sort of go up that one to actually get to the next bit. But it just goes to show for a 1931, what amount of airfield that would have been, because that would have been huge, and heaven knows how long the actual field would have actually been. I believe it must have been about maybe 100 meters, 120 meters, something odd, and that way then the crews can easily land. Right, we've just turned left into the Commonwealth Road, obviously, or would it be Vauxhall Drive first. Then we go up there, and then it's Commonwealth Road. So yeah, so it's turn left, straight up, and that will give you the next view, because we've came down, we've turned left, we've came down. Commonwealth Road is this one, and then we can go down and keep going. Which, just look at that, shows. Don't forget to look at the left hand side. But if you look at the left hand side, then that will be fine, because yeah, that's what it will look like. And then you obviously came across down London Bridge Road into Vauxhall Drive, and then at the end of Vauxhall Drive you get down to the Colmans Road, which will be the last bit. And that, because at that point, when we get to a certain point, we have to do a slight right deflection, because obviously what will happen is we have to go across into the Aviational Museum to do it, which I didn't bother with that on these photos, and we can then carry on from that, which is where it leads, as I showed you, as I will re-show you on the profit pictures in a minute with two maps. And that, because I'm not going to forget that. I've got one more map to show you, which will simplify it, and you sort of think, oh yeah, he did go down the right roads, and then he can, he came back up and across. So yes, it does go down Henley Road, turning left at London Bridge Road, turning left Vauxhall Drive. At the end of Vauxhall Drive, turning left into Colmans Road, up Colmans Road to a certain point, and then we have to diverge right into the Woodley Aerodrome Museum, because then we can come on to the other part of Colmans Road to get up to that next bit. So that is obviously now due to come along very shortly, because obviously we're getting to that bit, but we have to turn left in a minute to do that, and then we can get there. So yeah, we're slowly getting there, and then we can show you the other bit that goes up into Perimeter Road, because there's an area called Perimeter Road, and that's that actually goes up to the A4 and that area, because of Twyford railway station. You can get up towards there. Don't suggest you actually go towards there, because if you want to get into Woodley, just use the 13 and 14 bus, and you make it a lot quicker. So just looking at the left hand side again, that is all part of your aerodrome, every single inch of it. That just shows how much ground was actually covered in 1931, and that quite a lot of ground was covered. And that ground being covered, like I say, I hate to know really how many feet they covered within one side to the other side. So if this was farmland, this would have a lot of farmland and a hell of a lot of grass and stuff like that. But 11 Elms used to own it, and obviously lent it out to the RAF. So you're still looking at the left hand side, because we're still under the Perimeter Road borders, and that where the end of it all came. So yeah, that place was a massive, that's all I can tell. Well, any airfield is big anyway, and biggest airport I can think of being big would be something like Heathrow, but I never knew Woodley Airfield was going to be this big. I would have thought it would have been smaller, but it just goes to prove that even Woodley Airfield is big in comparison to any other airport, because and it was only grass. That's what gets me. Grass airfield, very large, used by the RAF in 1931, like we say, and by the looks of it, we're coming into Colmans Road, that particular area. obviously we can turn left into it and do the last bit of the leg to come back round, and then we'll be able to come back round and round the circuit, because it's got to go into perimeter road and that is then the next bit. So like we know, Sir Douglas Bardo was in Woodley Airfield. He did have his accident where he lost both legs and he had wooden ones. You can actually, find out more about Sir Douglas Bardo by the film Reach for the Sky. I found that film a very good film because obviously it goes into the relation of his RAF work and all the bits that should be allowed. So I believe we're turning left, obviously into Colin Moores Man Road. So we can then go upwards towards the next section where, like I say, we have to turn right and go across the car park inside the aerodrome, and that. Not been to the aerodrome, but I would recommend it, and then you'll be able to get around some of the bits. So you see the borders are still coming up, and we have to turn right soon because obviously it goes into the right. Which is just up here. I should have turned the camera around, which I believe is around about here, because around about here, we have to then divert off to the right at that angle. Alright, even though it's gone slightly forward, but we divert off to the right to get into the aerodrome, and then we can go over to the other side. So what I've done is jumped over to the other side for you. Anyway, I'm now showing it because that is roughly the area that we would have diverted off because of that map, and then we divert onto the other area. I'll re-show you that in a minute so we can verify that piece of information. So there'll be another map coming up soon, and then that comes out of the aerodrome area, and if we just slightly swing around, we can then proceed down to the road and carry on. So obviously Sir does it get it right. Obviously Sir Douglas Bardo did have victories. He had a good time. Was playing cricket. Obviously he enjoyed a bit of rugby, and he did that with the RAF as well. So as we come down, there will be another little section that we will turn left into Sandford Lane, which will be the ending of this particular section, which is Callum Moore's Man's Road still, because this is the intended route that would have been part of the aerodrome, which is still looking at the aerodrome on the left hand side. So everything is kept on the left hand side, literally. And then as we come up that Moore's Man's Road, we get to the very end of that road, which we then go into Sandford Lane, and that Woodley, alright, which we're now going into, and we can then go up that road, which we're just trying to swing around because I've taken photographs of me just swinging around and that, which is good. And that I've got a full swing around. Now we go up to the very end of that road, and then we get into Manhawk Way when we get to the end, which is there. And you could, in fact, on the original map, go straight ahead and on the left hand side you would have found a car park around about this area. And don't forget, you can, like I've just said, you can go straight ahead into the airfield to get in there. Turning right, we're in Manhawk Way, which we now can go up to the roundabout and go into Perimeter Road, okay, which this would have been part of the Perimeter Road when it was in 1931. Not sure the roundabout would have been there, but we'll just show you where it sort of led, so you can, you know, get a good indication of where it led. So you turn right, you do the first left, and that takes you up this particular road onto a footway. So as we're going up, because see, now I'm only indicating left because it's all on the left hand side still, you know, correspondingly. Alright, so we go up the actual road, and you can even walk up this road because it's the Perimeter Road, and of course, you know, just keep going up, and when you get to the very end you will find a T-junction, which we can't quite get to yet, but it will come very quick. Okay, so Perimeter Road, very simple, and then as we come up to the top, you turn left onto Biggins Hill Road. You walk along the Biggins Hill Road, of course, and the other part of the area would be just there, so that actually it would come straight across there and into that area. Okay, we can't do that, so what I've had to do is obviously go and find the nearest footpath. Okay, and then I've recorded the other side because some of my footage, you know, went down the pan, so I just, you know, salvaged it with what I've got and that. But there will be a pathway which we can go to, okay, just slightly down, you know, this pathway. So we just go down, you know, a couple of bits, and once we get to that light pathway on the right hand side, we will jump over to the other side and then be able to do it. So there's your pathway. So what I'm going to now do is obviously jump over to the other side so we can have a look from the other side. And there you go, that's the other side. So if we can, you know, just imagine that the actual runway has came over, and you now see it sort of coming downwards because I'm pointing in the right direction now, and we would have had the runway come down, go across literally that house and that, or around about that house. It might not be precisely bang on, and then you would have came out the other end. So if we just go to the other end, which would have been it would have been in this road, because obviously I've recorded it in such a way that as we come across, we can sort of see the coming across bits, and that, and then you're saying that's where it comes across, and that. So you've got one area there that it comes sort of across, and it's the left hand side you're looking at. That is the house that it would directly go straight, obviously, through, because it goes down that way, and that's why we indicated with that house. So it goes straight to the house. Alright, left hand side would have been the field, of course, and at the other side of that house we now come out of the other side, which would have been just there, and that would have came to, when we turn it round, over to there, and then we walk, or could have walked that way, alright, which I did. And of course I've recorded the other side of there so we can actually like see it, because obviously I could have nipped into that wood area, which I did, but then my footage got chewed up, so I just didn't bother recovering it. That comes out there anyway, which then you can walk down and come out at the other side. Alright, now there is an alleyway that directly goes to the actual site of what is it, Henley Road and Tippins Lane, alright, which is what we're heading for now, because if we continue going down this pathway, okay, we get to the actual area that will then coincide it, and that's where it went in as well, because it would have. Okay, and then we have to obviously shoot over a little bit. Alright, anyway, we're shooting over, and then where that alleyway is there would come out by the actual Henley Road comes thing, but it shoots across there from that other building, and then as we turn round, literally, alright, we'll be able to see, you know, where it then goes, because there's literally a footpath nearby this area, which you can, there it is, there's the footpath, so therefore we can shoot across there, but I've had to shoot across, you know, various roads, and then what I've actually done is, with those various roads, is made sure that I'm on the right track, so I'll show you on another map in a minute. That comes down to there, and finally, at the last minute, we come down to the very end, which is the gates that will, you know, lead you into Henley Road, Tappins Lane, which that one would, because you come along there, obviously, and there you go, Henley Road, Tappins Lane again, which I haven't shown you Tappins Lane, but that would be the same area, so that's all good. Now to the last map, just to prove that everything is right and everything is in proportion. So, if we have a look at both maps, we've got Henley Road on the left-hand map, but on the right-hand map we have Henley Road East. This is due to in 1931, obviously Henley Road East used to be called Henley Road. So I'm going to refer to Henley Road East as Henley Road. Okay, so as we know, just down to the bottom, which we have a look on the left hand side first, you have the factory area just there, which came down to about there, and then that area would have been filled. So if we have a look on the right hand side, okay, you can actually verify where it all like began, because all that car park there would have been actually like a bit of field. So, like in our previous video, we came from Tappits Lane, okay, which is right over here, okay, that's Tappits Lane there, okay, because we've got Tappits Lane, alright, so we came from, say, there, which is the edge of the map where that little gate was, where the alleyway was, so we start from Henley Road. So as we go down Henley Road, if you look on the right hand map, okay, we came down to the roundabout, which was about there, okay, and we actually then had to cross over the roundabout, which is there, so that little bit that we turned round at, we wouldn't have been able to do because we crossed over to there. Alright, we continue down Henley Road, which is now known as Henley Road East, no, but we'll refer to Henley Road for, you know, so we don't, you know, get ourselves completely confused. Alright, so Henley Road then goes to the crossroads, which is obviously a roundabout now, and we turn left into Loddon Bridge Road, because if I boost that up a little bit, we will notice on there Loddon Bridge Road. Alright, so we go down Loddon Bridge Road, okay, now because of the video we had to go into Vauxhall Drive, but it actually ends up going to that point there, alright, which you can't actually walk through, alright, goes down and then enters into Vauxhall Drive at the point of roughly Aston's Road. Okay, because you can see that. Alright, coming down the map, which is slightly off, you will continue down Vauxhall Drive. Alright, then you've got Connamore's area just there, which would be probably a farm, and because of the aerodrome, you have a gravel pit round about there. Okay, look, it's got a gravel pit. We come down the Vauxhall Drive to Collinmansmore Road, which is just there. Alright, it is slightly out, only ever so slightly. And as we then come round, you can see on the left-hand map as well, alright, that, you know, everything is roughly in the proportion it should be. And as we come to the top of Collinmans Road, like we predicted, yes, it is already going to the aerodrome. Alright, so we follow that into the aerodrome like we did roughly, and we get into the aerodrome at that particular point. Okay, we have another gravel pit over on the left hand side, round about there, which would be where the two roads meet. Okay, but we will continue into the aerodrome. Alright, and then we meet up with Collinmore Road like we did, to carry on going down. Pardon me, and meet up at Sandford Lane. Okay, so we went up Sandford Lane, alright, because this is slightly out of proportion, remember. Alright, and as you can see, as I pointed out in the other video, you have the car park run about there. Alright, which is indicated on our map also. We then had to turn right, but as I also indicated, if you were to go straight in, you'd be going into the aerodrome, and finding you could go into the aerodrome, which would be just there. Alright, now, if we turn right though, we can go up like Manhawk Road, which used to be called Perimeter Road at that time. Alright, and we carry on going. Now, as we can't think, that's why I moved into the road just there, but obviously it went over to there, but it doesn't make any difference, because we definitely know this is a slightly out of drift map, so I have found out it would have been Perimeter Road round there, not up there. Okay, so we go into Perimeter's Road. Alright, which as you can notice on the map also goes into Biggins Hill Road. Okay, I can show that more clearly if I just bring that up. See, Perimeter Road, alright. If we continue up, still following the guidelines, Biggins Hill Road. Okay, so we carry on going up. This bit is still in existence, which is part of the farmland. Okay, now the other bit to mention why we're at it is that if we continue to go up Biggins Hill Road and we turn left at the top like we did, like I said, we could go over to there, alright, to find the actual part of the other end of the aerodrome. Okay, so we definitely know that we've probably gone off track slightly, because it would have went across most likely there and then into Biggins Hill. So we might have got the track, you know, slightly wrong, but it doesn't matter. But what I would like to mention is if we turn left, we can follow the road down and find all those buildings we had around that area, which we can. That one especially, just there is the hotel. Okay, so obviously if you live very close to that, which is Beacon Close, by the looks of it, is the closest part you're going to get. There you go, so that's on the map. Whether it is right, I still do not know. Alright, but we're going by this map. Now, if we follow the guidelines properly, okay, and we actually now go for this guideline here, okay, and we sort of come round, alright, okay, we also use Perimeter Road and Biggins Hill Road, alright. As this is slightly out because of the map, it doesn't matter. We then cross over there and we move round, and that's why I went for those different roads that I mentioned, and came to the end of the road and so on, because it then goes round, okay, and as it goes round you meet another gravel pit in a minute, okay, because at the end of all of this, alright, and that's why I kept sort of showing you bits and pieces of where it all came out of. You've got the gravel pit just there, alright, comes around, and then it enters back where it was just there. Alright, so it does go in a complete round circle, and that's why I showed you on the other map. Okay, next we go to some of the aircrafts that I've noticed, and then we will wrap up the video. So, over to Armstrong Way. This is a medium-sized bomber made in the UK, and it was a twin-engine frontline bomber with the Royal Air Force, and the aircraft was developed in the mid-1930s. It was used in bombing runs in Germany, and it had 4 engines. Made in Canada, and its first flight was on the 16th of August 1947, and it was used in the United States Army. It has a single engine, and it was used as a bush plane. The United States Army purchased several hundred of the DC-2 aircraft. The aircraft was also used for search and rescue in the United States. In 1783, this Frenchman made his first manned balloon flight from Paris and was the first to cross the English Channel in 1793 with a 21.5-hour flight. In 1808, whilst airborne, he had a heart attack and fell from the balloon, and he died a year later. She was born on the 22nd of September 1901 in Blackheath in Kent, England, and she passed away on the 6th of April 1983 at the age of 82 in Worthing. She became interested in aviation in the 1920s with her husband, as she loved to design aircraft, and she trained other women to design aircraft. In the 1930s and 1940s, this was one of the most widely used seaplanes of World War II. The aircraft was being used in every branch of the United States Armed Forces. The last military use was in the 1980s. As of 2014, nearly 80 years after its first flight, the aircraft continues to fly as a water bomber or air tanker in aerial firefighting operations in some parts of the world. None remain in military service. It was originally designed to be a patrol bomber, a aircraft with a long operation range intended to locate and attack enemy transport ships at sea in order to disrupt enemy supply lines. This aircraft was a competitionary British entry for the 1934 Robinson Air Race between England and Australia. The race was sponsored by Australia to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the state of Victoria. Estimates placed the cost at around £50,000 per aircraft, but each aircraft was sold for £5,000 before they were ordered before February 1934. 3 aircraft were actually ordered for the race, the first aircraft being E1, registration GACSP or Golf Alpha Charlie Sierra Papa, which flew on the 8th of September 1934, just 6 weeks before the start of the race. Designed by Arthur Hogg, the monoplane was powered by 2 engines, 2 crew members seated behind 3 large fuel tanks, providing a maximum range of nearly 3,000 miles, and with the airframe featuring a retractable undercarriage. The lightweight construction resulted in it being made almost entirely out of wood, with metal only being used on load-bearing components. The 3 race entries were the black and gold Lovely Black Magic, call signs GACSP or Golf Alpha Charlie Sierra Papa, and GACSR, which is Golf Alpha Charlie Sierra Romeo, came fourth and returned to England carrying newsreel film, completing the round trip in a recorded 13.5 days. This is a twin-engine passenger cargo aircraft capable of carrying payloads of up to 4.5 tons, 3,856 kilograms, and it can operate on airstrips which make it unique. This makes it a good aircraft to operate in and out of tiny jungle landing strips or from short fields located close to the cities. It was designed to take off and clear a 50-foot, 15-metre obstruction in the distance of 1,185 feet, 361 metres, with 0 wind. The large rear loading doors provide access to a 1,150 cubic feet cabin. When used in civic transport, it accommodates 30 passengers and baggage, and as a troop carrier it can transport up to 32 fully equipped combat troops, and the rear doors may be opened in flight to allow the troops to be dropped from the air to the ground in a minimum amount of time. The air ambulance can also be using this aircraft to take a maximum of 22 stretcher cases. The world's first supersonic airline was made, and British Airways and the French airlines had Concorde that had 4 engines and could fly at Mach 2 or twice the speed of sound, or 1,354 miles per hour, and can take 92 to 128 passengers. Concorde started its first flight in 1969 and went into passenger flights in 1976 and carried on its service until 2003. 20 aircraft were made and 6 prototypes were made, and only the French and UK took up the aircraft. The ticket price from New York to London was $7,995, and that was a return ticket. The original program costs was up to £70 million. The program had lots of overruns and delays, with the program eventually costing £1.3 billion. It was this extreme cost that became the main factor in the production run being much smaller. Later, another factor which affected the supersonic transport program was that the supersonic flight could only be used on ocean crossing routes to prevent the sonic boom being heard over populated areas, with only 7 airframes each being operated by the British and the French. The per-unit cost was impossible to recoup, so the French and British governments abandoned the development costs. British Airways and Air France were able to operate Concorde at a profit in spite of very high maintenance costs, because the aircraft was able to sustain a high ticket price. Flights from Heathrow in London as well as Paris were going to the John F. Kennedy Airport in the United States of America. It took 3 hours to fly from Heathrow in London to John F. Kennedy in the United States of America, and you would be there at the same time you left. So if you leave London, say at 10 o'clock in the morning, you would arrive in the United States of America, John F. Kennedy Airport at 10 o'clock. So talk about time travel. Concorde won the 2006 Great British Design Quest, organised by the BBC. Concorde had to retire in 2003, 3 years after the crash of Air France Flight 4590, in which all passengers and crew were killed. On the 25th of July 2000, Air France Flight 4590 registration FBTSC or Foxtrot Bravo Tango Sierra Charlie crashed in France after departing from Paris en route to John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City, killing all 100 passengers and 9 crew members on board, as well as the 4 people on the ground. It was the only fatal accident involving Concorde. According to the official investigation, the crash was caused by a metal strip that had fallen from a DC-10 that had taken off minutes earlier. This fragment punctured a tyre on Concorde's left main wing bogie during takeoff. The tyre exploded and a piece of rubber hit the fuel tank, which caused a fuel leak and led to a fire. The crew shut down engine number 2 in response to a fire warning, and with engine number 1 surging and producing little power, the aircraft was unable to gain altitude or speed. The aircraft entered a rapid pitch up, then suddenly descended, rolling left and causing tail low near to a hotel. Claim that the metal strip caused the crash was disposed during the trial by the witnesses. A pilot of an aircraft that had just landed on the adjacent runway where Flight 4590 caught fire, and by an independent French TV investigator that found a wheel spanner had not been installed into the left side main gear, and that the plane caught fire some 1,000 feet from where the metal strip lay. British investigators and former French Concorde pilots looked at several other possibilities that the report ignored, including an unbalanced weight distribution in the fuel tanks and loose landing gear. They came to the conclusion that Concorde veered off course on the runway, which reduced takeoff speed below the crucial minimum. John Hampson's son, who had served as a Concorde captain for 15 years with British Airways, said the fire on its own should have not been survivable. The pilot should have been able to fly his way out of trouble. He had not been for a lethal combination of operational errors and legislative errors by the maintenance department of the Air France that nobody wants to talk about. On the 6th of December, though, in 2020, Continuing Airlines and John Taylor, a mechanic who installed the metal strip, were found guilty for involuntary manslaughter. However, on the 30th of November 2012, a French court overturned the conviction saying mistakes by the men did not make them criminally responsible. Before the accident, Concorde was the safest operational passenger airline in the world with 0 passenger deaths per kilometre travelled, but there had been 2 non-fatal accidents at the rate of tyre damage some 30 times higher than the supersonic airlines from 1995 to 2000. Safety improvements were made in the wake of the crash, including more secure electrical controls, lining on the fuel tanks, and sufficient development burst-resistant tyres. The first flight with the modifications departed from London Heathrow on the 17th of July 2001, piloted by BA Chief Concorde pilot Mike Bannerton. During the 3-hour 20-minute flight over the mid-Atlantic towards Iceland, going at Mach 2.02 and 60,000 feet, 18,000 metres above ground level, before returning to normal flight, as the test flight allowed Concorde to return to flying from London to New York and was watched on live TV and by crews on the ground at both locations. The first flights with passengers after the accident took place on the 11th of September 2001, landing shortly before the World Trade Center attacks in the United States. This was not a commercial flight. All passengers were BA employees. Normal commercial operation resumed on the 7th of November 2001 by British Airways and Air France. Aircraft Golf Bravo Oscar Alpha Echo, which is GBOAE, and FBTSD, or Foxtrot Bravo Tango Sierra Delta, with services going to New York JFK Airport. Concorde had suffered 2 previous non-fatal accidents were similar to each other. On the 12th of April 1989, Concorde registration Golf Bravo Oscar Alpha Foxtrot, or GBOAF, on a chartered flight from New Zealand to Sydney suffered a failure in flight at supersonic speed. As the aircraft was climbing and accelerating through Mach 1.7, a thud was heard. The crew did not notice any handling problems, and they heard a minor engine surge. No further difficulty was encountered until descending through 40,000 feet at Mach 1.3, when a vibration was felt throughout the aircraft, lasting 2 or 3 minutes. Most of the upper rudder had become separated from the aircraft at this point. Aircraft handling was unaffected, and the aircraft made safe landing at Sydney. The UK's Accident Investigation Branch, AAIB, considered that the skin of the rudder had been separated from the rudder surface over a period of time before the accident due to moisture seeping past the rivets in the rudder. Furthermore, production staff had not followed proper procedures during the early modifications of the rudder, but the procedures were difficult to make. The aircraft was repaired and returned to service. On the 21st of March 1992, a Concorde of British registration Golf Bravo Oscar Alpha Bravo, or GBOAB, on a scheduled flight from London to New York, also suffered a failure in flight at supersonic speed while cruising at Mach 2. At approximately 53,000 feet above main sea level, the crew heard a thud. Difficulties in handling were noticed and no instructions given any indications. This crew also suspected there had been a minor engine surge. 1 hour later, during descent and while descending below Mach 1.4, a sudden severe vibration began throughout the aircraft. The vibration warned when power was added to the number 2 engine, and it was tendance when that engine's power was reduced. The crew shut down the number 2 engine and made a sufficient landing in New York, noting only that the increased rudder controls was needed to keep the aircraft on its intended approach course. Again, the skin had become separated from the rudder, which led to most of the upper rudder becoming separated in flights. The AAIB conducted that the repair materials had leaked into the substance of the rudder during the recent repair, weakening the bond between the skin and the rudder, leading it to breaking in flight. The large size of the repair had made it difficult to keep repair materials out of the area, and prior to this accident, the severity of the effect of these repair materials on the sufficient of the skin of the rudder was not appropriate. The 2010 trial involving Continuous Airlines over the crash of Flight 4590 established that the 2010 trial involving Continuous Airlines over the crash of Flight 4590 established that the 1976 until Flight 4590 there had been 57 tyre failures involving Concords during takeoffs, including a near crash on the 14th of June 1976 involving Air France Flight 54, where a tyre blew out, pierced a plane's fuel tank and damaged the port side engine and electrical cables, with the loss of 2 of the craft's hydraulic systems. The Air Chief Marshal was in charge of flight command during the Battle of Britain, and he pushed for the development of radar, radio and bulletproof window screens for the fighters in World War II, head of fighter command, including in the Battle of Britain. On an overcast day in November 1941, a 13-year-old boy heard the drone of aircraft engines, plus this boy see 4 bombs coming from the aircraft, and 2 bombs exploded, and the other 2 1,000-kilogram bombs were found in 1960. This was a small unlicensed civilian airfield close to Alstom in Oxfordshire, which is currently used for microlights, light aircraft and motor gliders. The International Civic Aviation Organisation and its contact radio frequency is 129.880. The aerodrome has a main runway 08 and 26, which is 1,100 metres long, consisting of a tarmac surface over concrete based. There is also a grass strip, south side grass, of 800 metres, which can be made available to some aircraft. The aerodrome was built during the Second World War as a typical triangle 3-runway Royal Air Force Bomber Command airfield. The aerodrome opened on the 15th of September 1942 as RAF Eastone. It started life as a satellite airfield for the RAF No. 21 operations training. It is currently used for general aviation. The hard runway is leased by Oxfordshire Sport Flying Limited, who provide flying lessons over Oxfordshire in medium motor gliders. operating during only daytime hours after 8 o'clock in the morning local time. Flying activities can only take place in accordance with the prior permission requirement. The Northside Grass runway is owned and run by Eastone Airlines and is operated dawn to dusk all year round. Eastone Airlines also provide maintenance for aircraft. Eastone Flying Club are the largest club on the airfield and are currently building a squadron of Mark 26B Spitfires. Eastone Sales and Services run talks of the projects and tours of the facilities twice a week, spring to autumn. Eastone Flying Club is also currently home to the Jaguar XX764 undergoing restoring. He was born in Paris and set numerous official records for both distance and long distance, including the first to fly a complete circuit of 1 kilometre in 1908. The Farman Aircraft Company 1914 model was used extremely for observations during World War I and was the first long-distance passenger airliner beginning regular Paris to London flights on the 8th of February 1919. Greenham Close has been found to be Greenham Common in Newbury, with the 101st Airborne Division US Army crossed the Atlantic in September 1943 and camped around Newbury. For the next 8 months they worked and played hard, virtually taking over the famous Berkshire town as the roar of the C-47 trooper carriers from Marlborough, Willfield, Ramsbury and Aldermaston and Greenham Common filled the air day and night. At Greenham Common, the airborne troops assisted to the 438th TCG were all inside the perimeter area and with armed guards. Greenham Common was 2 miles from Newbury on the Heath and Scrub site. Greenham Common Airfield was first surveyed early in 1941 as a satellite for the purpose of the bomber at Aldermaston. Authorization was given in May 1941, and because the land was poor, there was none of the usual opposition for the farming interests. Development of the standard pattern aircraft with a 5,988 feet, 1,825 metres main east to west runway went ahead. Several minor roads crossing the common were closed, but the main Newbury to Basingstoke road was filtered with barriers and guard huts. Where it was cut, then the technical site and the crossing the approaches to several of the airfield areas to accommodate the C-47. More of the very effective loop hard standings were built to support the original panhandlers, bringing the total available to 50. Steel track marshalling areas were laid at each end of the main runway, allowing gliders to be positioned on the runway with tugs still able to manoeuvre alongside for mass steam takeoffs. 2 T2 hangars remain the only covered serviceable accommodation on the base, but special long buildings were constructed for storage and inspection of the towing cables. By the beginning of June, all 4 squadrons of the 438th TCG 87, 88, 89 and 90 TCS were fully trained parachute drops and glider touring day or night, and were given the task of leading the airborne forces too. This was a British two-engine, four-seater touring aircraft designed and built by Miles Aircraft at Woodley Aerodrome. It was the last Miles aircraft to be produced in quantity. It was described by the manufacturer as the safest light aeroplane in the world. Designed as a twin-end tractable landing gear version of the earlier Miles Messenger, the aircraft first flew on the 26th of October 1945. It had 4 seats with a low wing monoplane of plastic bonded plywood. It had twin vertical tail unit, originally powered by a 90 horsepower engine. The aircraft was put into large-scale production straight away, and 130 were sold in the first year. Later, they were fitted with different engines. The aircraft was popular with private owners for touring throughout Europe, and many were exported to Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and other Commonwealth countries. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, they were frequently entered into air races. Several aircraft were used as light business transporters by commercial firms, including Shell and BP Limited. Other examples were flown by UK independent airliners on light charter work within the UK and Europe. No medals were awarded to the crews due to his bombing during World War II. Only the 2012 was a medal unrevealed in Green Park to the men. What is forgotten is that Bomber Commander dropped 7,000 tons of food to the starving population of Holland at the end of the war. It could also be that Thomas Harris, a balloonist who in 1824 flew from London, but due to problems needed discard ballast, he threw everything overboard, eventually including himself, to save the life of his female companion. He died, but she survived. The world's first vertical short takeoff and landing fighter aircraft, the Harrier, informally referred to as the Harrier jump jet, is a family of jet-powered attack aircraft capable of vertical short takeoffs and landing operations. Namely after a bird of prey, it was originally developed by the British manufacturers in 1960. The Harrier emerged as the only truly successful vertical short takeoff and landing design of the many attempts during that era. It was a supersonic aircraft. Unlike most of its competitions, it was to operate from car parks or forest clearances without requiring large or vulnerable air bases. Later, the design was adapted for use from aircraft carriers. The Sea Harrier is a naval strike air defence fighter and was operated by both the Royal Navy and the Indian Navy. During the 1980s, the second generator of Harrier emerged, manufactured in the United States as the AV-8B, and in Britain as the British Aerospace Harrier II. By the start of the 21st century, the first generation Harriers had been withdrawn, many operators having chose to make the second generation as a replacement. In the long term, several operators have announced their intention to replace the Harrier fleets with the F-35 Lightning II, designed as the F-35B. A number of aircraft companies in both Europe and America decided to invest in the vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, which would not therefore need runways for taking off and landing. This is a single-seater fighter aircraft in the 1930s. It had a speed higher than 200 miles per hour, 321 kilomiles per hour. First flight was on the 25th of March 1931, and it retired in 1949. It had a higher sensitive controls, which gave it a super acrobatic performance. It had a climb rate of almost 2,400 feet per minute, 730 meters per minute. The fighter aircraft had the Merlin Rolls-Royce engine. In 1947, Harlow Page bought some of the assets of the bankrupt Moulds Aircraft Company. The assets include existing designs, tools and jigs, most noticeably for the Moulds M52 supersonic research aircraft and the Moulds site at Woodley near Reading. The operation was named Harlow Page Reading Limited, a company to buy and operate the accessories formed out of inactive Harlow Page Transport Limited. The most successful of the inherited designs became the Harlow airliner. Designs from the Reading site used the initials HPR or Harlow Page Reading. Unlike other large British aircraft manufacturers, Harlow Page resides the government's pressure to merge into larger entitlements. Unable to compete for government orders or build large commercial aircraft, Harlow Page produced its final notable Harlow Page design, the Jetstream. This was a small turboprop-powered aircraft with a pressured cabin and a passenger capability of 12 to 18 passengers. It was designed primarily for the United States, and though successful, the Jetstream was too late to save Harlow Page, and the company went into voluntary liquidation in March 1970 and was wound up after 61 years trading under the same name. The Jetstream lived on, the design being purchased and produced by Scottish Aviation, continuing after the company was bought by British Aerospace in 1977. An important fighter aircraft of World War II, which was the British single-seat fighter aircraft of the 1930s to 1940s. It was used during the Battle of Britain in 1940, but had some loss by the Luftwaffe by being fired at. This aircraft was a biplane in the early 1930s. As there was a lack of interest, the Air Ministry then built the monoplane with retractable landing gear and more powerful Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. The Air Ministry ordered this new aircraft in the late 1934s, and the prototype Hurricane K5083 performed its maiden flight on the 6th of November 1935. In June 1936, the Hurricane went into production for the Air Ministry. It entered squadron service on the 25th of December 1937. The RAF had 18 Hurricanes equipped squadrons in service. In North America, T-6 single-engined advanced trainer aircraft used to train pilots of the United States Army Air Forces, United States Navy, Royal Air Force, and other air forces of the British Commonwealth during World War II and into the 1970s. Designed by North American Aviation, the United States Army Air Corps and the USAAF designed it as the 86. The United States Navy designed it as the SNJ, the name by which is best known outside the United States. Starting in 1948, the new United States Air Force, USAF, designed it as the T-6, with the USN following in 1962. It remains a popular warbird aircraft used for air displays and static displays. It has also been used many times to simulate various Japanese aircraft. It has been used in movies for World War II. This aircraft was used as a basic combat aircraft in March 1937. The first model went into production and 180 was supplied to the United States Army Air Force and the Royal Air Force. This aircraft was built as an advanced trainer with outer wing panels with and a trailing edge, squared off wingtips and a triangular rudder. This is a 1930s British two-seater guide-wing monoplane designed with a glide wing and a fixed landing gear. The first aircraft, a Mark 1 registered Golf Alpha Echo Zulu November with a single-seat open cockpit, was powered by a 50 horsepower, 35 kilowatt A50 piston engine. The first solo crossing on the 4th of February 1902 and the 26th of August 1974 by an American military officer, also an inventor. At the age of 25 in 1927, he went from the US airmail pilot to the world fame by winning the prize for making a non-stop flight from New York to Paris in 33.5 hours. 3,006 miles long in a purpose-built single-engine monoplane, but not the first non-stop transatlantic flight. This was the first solo transatlantic flight, the first transatlantic flight between two major city hubs, and the longest transiting flight by almost 2,000 miles. He was an officer in the US Army Air Corps Reserve, and he received the United States highest military decorated, the Medal of Honor, for his transatlantic flight. Used immediately before and during the Second World War, it was used on small airstrips behind enemy lines to place or recover agents. The first flight was on the 15th of June 1936, and it retired in 1947. The aircraft was designed to be powered by a Bristol Mercury air-cooled engine and had high wings and a fixed landing gear mounted on an inverted U-squared shaped tube that supported wing studs at the apex and had springs with the wheels. It had a mounting for the Browning machine gun and for the small removable stud wings that could be used to carry light bombs. The wings had a reversed taper towards the root, which gave the impression of a bent wing from some angles, and no, it was straight. This was a target tug aircraft of the Royal Air Force and Fleet Air Arm that was serviced during the Second World War. It was the first British aircraft to be designed sufficiently for target towing, based upon the Wells Master II. This aircraft has a straightened airframe to handle the stress of towing a target. Other differences from the Master include the longer nose, higher cockpit and gradual wingspan, but otherwise the two aircraft share many common components. The targets and towing gear were contained in a fairing beneath the fuselage and were retractable by a wind-powered winch. The first prototype was first flown on the 24th of April 1942. In total, 1,724 aircraft were produced by Miles Aircraft Limited for the RAF and FAA to meet air marshal specifications. This was the British civilian 20-passenger light transport aircraft designed as a high-wing monoplane with 4 engines and all-metal construction. It was capable of carrying 2 crew and at least 20 passengers. The aircraft was designed with the first of 3 prototypes, registrations U10, flying on the 19th of May 1946. A total of 25 aircraft were ordered by the Ministry of Supply and 25 by the British European Airways, but Miles had financial problems and needed orders for over 100. Not helped when a prototype aircraft crashed and the power surge to lead to the loss of components already produced. When the Miles Company went bankrupt, the Harley Page bought the assets, including the factory at Woodley near Reading, Berkshire and design rights to the aircraft. The new company started producing the aircraft, 40 aircraft built over the next 3 years, and the new design, the Harlow Page Redding HPR-1, a twin-engine prototype turbo-powered version. The first prototype aircraft, registration Golf Alpha Lima Uniform Bravo, left Woodley on the 14th of January 1950 for sales tour of Australia and New Zealand. The aircraft was painted in the BEA markings in September 1951 and was demonstrated to the airline at Heathrow. During tests for the British European Airways, it was decided that the aircraft was not suitable to replace the other aircraft, and the order was reduced to 7 aircraft, none of which was accepted by the BEA. 6 aircraft were delivered to the West African Airways Corporation in late 1952. Most of the unsold aircraft went to the Royal Air Force as navigation trainers. The Miles M9 Master was a British two-seater monoplane, advanced trainer design and built by aviational company Miles Aircraft Limited. There was a large number of the aircraft used in both the Royal Air Force and the Fleet Air Arm during the Second World War. The RAF ordered 500 M9A Master advanced trainers to meet the needs. Once in service, it provided a fast, strong and fully aerobatic aircraft that had high performance. Throughout its production life, thousands of aircraft and various variations of the Master were produced, the later being largely inflated by engine availability. Perhaps the most used aircraft was the M24 Master fighter, armed with a 303-inch machine guns. It was introduced to feature as an emergency fighter during the Battle of Britain. This model did not see any other combat flights. Original trainer models had a machine gun and 8 bombs intended for training purposes only. Miles was the name used between 1943 and 1961 to market the aircraft of the British engineer Miles, who, with his wife, aviation and draftswoman Maxine Blossom Miles, and his brother George, designed numerous light civic and military aircraft and a range of prototypes. He designed many aircraft which were the seaplane submarine S-6B, winning the trophy competition in 1931. He also designed the Spitfire, the prototype of which flew for the first time on the 5th of March 1936 and was capable of 394 miles per hour. He did not see it enter service with the RAF, however, as he died on the 11th of June 1937, aged 42, from bowel cancer. This was built in 1930 and was a two-seater monoplane built in Woodley by the Miles Aircraft Company. The aircraft had a low-wing design made of plywood and was made for long-range flights. The M12 had fixed wheels and an American 200 horsepower B6 engine. He was 18 and was the youngest officer in the Royal Air Force. At the age of 22, became a flying instructor. In July to August 1931, he set a record time of 8 days, 19 hours for a flight from Australia to England, and in March 1932, a record for flying from England to South Africa. He died in 1941 when the aircraft he was delivering crashed. His first flight was on the 23rd of May 1967 and retired on the 28th of June 2012. The aircraft was made for the RAF with 49 built for service. It was used as a maritime patrol aircraft developed and operated by the United Kingdom. The design was based on that of the Comet 4 Civic airliner, which had reached the end of its commercial life. The first two prototypes, XV-148 and XV-147, were built from the two final unfinished Comet 4C airframes. The Comet's turbojet engines were replaced by Rolls-Royce turbofans for better fuel economy, particularly at low altitude required for meantime patrols. Major fuselage changes were made, including an internal weapons bay, a new tail with electrical warfare sensors. After the first flight in May 1967, the RAF ordered a total of 46. A total of 5 squadrons used this type of aircraft. I do apologise that we couldn't find a photo for Rose Close, because this man obviously didn't want to be photographed, but his name was Thomas Rose, and he was a British flying ace of World War I, winning the King's Cup air race in 1935. He flew from London to Cape Town in 3 days, 17 hours and 37 minutes, and from 1939 to 1945, the chief test pilot with Phillips and Proles Aircraft Limited, renamed Miles Aircraft Limited, in 1943. Speedfires have hit the ground, touched the sea, bashed through trees, cut high tension wires, collided in the air, both shot to pieces, had rudders and parts of wings fall off, and have yet made safe landings with or without wheels. The Spitfire was a beautiful plane, much loved by its pilots, but also a robust and aerodynamic design. The Spitfire was equipped with machine guns, cannons, and rockets and bombs. It could be used at high altitude or adapted as a ground attack plane. Windscreen plastic had been replaced by armed glass. Armed plated was fitted at the rear of the engine bulkhead. A power-operated pump was installed to operate the undercarriage, and a tail skid had been replaced by a wheel. The Merlin Mark II engines were giving way to the Mark III with its improved air screw shift, and two-bladed wooden propeller had been replaced by a three-bladed metal two-pitched propeller. The short S-25 Sunderland was a British flying boat patrol bomber developed and constructed by Short Brothers for the Royal Air Force. The aircraft took its service name from the town Sunderland in north-east England. It was developed for the RAF long-range patrols as a flying boat. It had advanced aviation hull and was outfitted with guns, bombs, and air mines. It was one of the most powerful and widely used flying boats throughout the Second World War. On the 17th of July 1940, a RAAF performed the first unassisted U-boat kill. This aircraft helped in the Berlin airlift, delivering supplies to the blockaged German city. The RAF continued to use the Sunderland in military capability up until 1959. In December 1960, the French Navy retired their aircraft, which were the last remaining examples in military use within the Northern Hemisphere. The type also remained in service up until 1967. When in service, it had a maximum of 4 engines and was a monoplane. The aircraft did have machine guns and Bristol engines capable of generating 950 horsepower thrust each. Testing showed that the aircraft could be fully refueled in 20 minutes and that its most in-company cruising speed was 130 kiloknots, 150 miles at 2,000 feet. At this speed and altitude, a consumption rate of 110 gallons per hour gave the aircraft a lasting flying time of 18 hours, during which it could cover 2,750 miles. The takeoff distance was found to be 680 yards, 620 metres long. The Bardo Way. Douglas Bardo, WW2 fighter ace who lost his legs at Woodley Airfield. Group Captain Sir Douglas Robert Bardo was born on the 21st of February 1910 in St John's Wood, London. At the age of 2, Bardo joined his parents in India for a year when his father resigned from his job in 1913. The family moved back to London, and Bardo's father saw action in the First World War in the Royal Engineers and was wounded in action in 1917. He remained in France after the war, where, having attained the rank of major, he died in 1922 of complications from these wounds in hospital in the same area where Bardo would bail out and be captured in 1941. Bardo was brought up in the village of West Riding of Yorkshire. Bardo went to Sir Edward's School and played rugby and cricket. Bardo joined the RAF in 1928 and was commissioned in 1930. In December 1931, while attempting some acrobatics, he crashed his aircraft at Woodley Airfield and lost both legs. Having been on the brink of death, he recovered to retake flying training, passed his check flights, and then requested reactivation as a pilot. Although there were no regulations apparent to his situation, he was retired against his will on medical grounds. After the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939, Douglas Bardo returned to the RAF and was accepted as a pilot. He scored his first victory over Dunkirk during the Battle of France in 1940. He then took part in the Battle of Britain. In August 1931, Bardo bailed out over German-occupied France and was captured. Bardo made a number of escape attempts and was eventually sent to the prisoner of war camp Colditz Castle. He remained there until April 1945, when the camp was taken over by the 1st United States Army. Bardo left the RAF permanently in February 1946 and resumed his career in the oil industry. During the 1950s, a book and a film, Reach for the Sky, showed his life and the RAF career at the end of the Second World War. Bardo campaigned for disabilities and the Queen's Birthday Honours. 1976 was appointed a Knights Bachelor for services to disabled people. He continued to fly until ill health forced him to stop in 1979. Bardo died at the age of 72 on the 5th of September 1982 after a heart attack. He was credited with 22 air victories, 4 shared victories, and 11 enemy aircraft damaged. The Tiger Moth was a 1930s British bioplane designed for the Royal Air Force and many other operators as a primary training aircraft. In addition to the types primarily used for training, the Second World War saw the RAF Tiger Moth operating in meantime surveillance and defence anti-invasion operations. Some aircraft were even outfitted to function as armed light bombers. The Tiger Moth remained in service with the RAF until the early 1950s. Many of the military aircraft entered into civilian operation. Many nations had used the Tiger Moth in both military and civic applications, and it remains in widespread use use as a recreational aircraft in several countries. It is still used as a primary training aircraft for these pilots wanting to gain experience before moving on to other tailwing aircraft. Many Tiger Moths are now employed by various companies offering trial lesson experiences. The company produced a light aircraft known the difference in importance of correct sizing, such as aircraft to appeal to the civic market, such as touring training aircraft, flying clubs and private aviational customers. The firm had got great success with the scaled down version of the DH-51. The starting point for the DH-82 Tiger Moth had developed successfully more capable engines, and the company had produced a new winged monoplane aircraft to test them. This aircraft became the first aircraft to be referred to as the Tiger Moth, but improvements made on the Tiger Moth monoplane were incorporated into a military trainer. One of the main changes made to the Moth was improved access to the front cockpit, since the training requirements specified the front seat occupant had to be able to escape easily, extremely when wearing a parachute. Access to the front cockpit of the Moths were restricted by the engine's fuel tank directly above and the front cockpit and the rear upper wing. The solution adopted was to shift the upper wing forward but swing the wings back to maintain the same centre of lift. Other changes were folded down doors on both sides of the cockpit and a revised exhaust system. The Tiger Moth quickly became a commercial success, and various models were exported to more than 25 air forces of various nations. In added to military demand, aircraft was also produced for the civic market. At one point, the flow of orders for the Tiger Moth affected manufactured aircraft and domestic customers, and it could carry up to 4 passengers. This was a British engineering aircraft and was developed for the Royal Air Force with Rolls-Royce engines and Vikings machine gun. Of the 1912 used in World War I for the Vikings Limited, they were often Vikings machine guns aside with regular water-cooled model known universally as Vikings. Vikings were manufactured as the main factory in Brooklands in Surrey. The V-bombers were the Royal Air Force aircraft during the 1950s and 1960s and were the United Kingdom Strategy Nuclear Strike Force, known effectively as the V-Force or Bomber Command Main Force. When it became clear that the Soviet Union's surface-to-air missiles could be down high-flying aircraft, the V-Bomber Force changed to low-level attack methods. Adapting standoff weapons were introduced, starting with the Blue Steel missile. It was then planned to move to a much larger range Skybolt air-launched ballistic missile. When the US cancelled Skybolt, the V-Force was highly questionable. This led to the Royal Navy taking over the nuclear role from 1968, using UGM-27 missiles launched from the nuclear submarines. The V-bombers were also capable of dropping weapons supported by complex computer systems known as the Navigational and Bombing System that allowed accurate bombing even over very long ranges. The Vulcan is well remembered during 1982 with the Falklands War. The supports such missions, tanker aircraft versions of all 3 designs were developed. V-bombers with their nuclear bombs ended in 1982. The Royal Air Force Bomber Command ended the Second World War with a policy of using heavy 4-piston engine bombers for any raids and remained committed to this policy in the immediate post-war period. The Falcon was a 500 mile per hour, 800 kmh at 40,000 feet, 12,000 meter aircraft, and even at the time there were these who could see that the guided missiles would eventually make such aircraft vulnerable, but development of such missiles was proving difficult, and fast and high-flying jet bombers were likely to serve for years before there was a need for something better. Mass bombs were unnecessary if a single bomb could destroy an entire city or military installation with a nuclear weapon. It would have to be a large bomber. Such the first generation nuclear weapons were big and heavy. Such a large and advanced bomber would be expensive on a per unit basis, as it would be produced in small quantities. During the early part of the Second World War, Britain had a nuclear weapons project codenamed Tube Alley, which the 1943 Cuban Agreement merged with America. The British government trusted that the United States would continue to share nuclear technology, which it regarded as a joint discovery after the war. The first British atom bomb was tested in Operation Hurricane on the 3rd of October 1952. In November 1946, the Air Ministry issued an operational requirement OR-230 for an advanced jet bomber capable of carrying a 10,000-pound, 4,500 kilogram bomb to a target 2,000 nautical miles, 3,700 kilometers from a base anywhere in the world, with a cruising speed of 500 knots, 930 kilomiles per hour, and at an altitude of between 35,000 and 50,000 feet, which is 11,000 to 15,000 meters. The bomb arose from a early operation requirement for the atom bomb OR-1001, which specified a maximum weight of 10,000 pounds, 4,500 kilograms. The speed and altitude requirements were based on what was thought necessary to penetrate enemy air defences. The aircraft itself was to weigh no more than 200,000 pounds, 91,000 kilograms. Calculations showed that such aircraft would require a runway of 2,000 yards, 1,800 meters long. Bomber Command's runways were built to handle the Lancaster, and extending them would be an expensive undertaking involving not only added constructions but land and demolition work. OR-230 was never be fulfilled and was cancelled on the 17th of September 1952. The Operations Requirements Committee met to discuss OR-230 on the 17th of December 1946. This committee was chaired by the Vice Chair of the Air Staff, Air Ministry, Sir William Stokesson, with the Director of the Technical Development Air responsible for the Ministry of Supply. The result was a new operational requirement OR-229 on the 7th of January 1947. This was made the same as the OR-230, but the range was cut to 1,500 nautical miles, 2,800 kilomiles, and the weight reduced to 100,000 pounds, 45,000 kilograms. OR-229 was formed for the basis of the Air Ministry's orders B35-46. A request for designs went to most of the United Kingdom's major aircraft manufacturers. On the 30th of April 1947, Armstrong Whitworth England Electrical and Harlow Page were invited to submit final designs tenders. A tender design was held on the 28th of July 1947 and discovered to order the design submitted by Aaron along with a small flying model to test its delta wing design. The 17th of December 1946 meeting that came up with the OR230 also declared to solicitedly bid for a more comprehensive design that could be put into service more quickly and could act as further insurance. Again, it's the failure of both of the more advanced designs. This was expressed in another operational requirement, OR239, from which the Air Ministry said B14-46 was generated, which was issued on the 11th of August 1947. This had a lower cruising altitude and speed requirements than B35-46, but was otherwise identified. A design was put forward by Short, which was given a ITP in November 1947. The Harlow Page Victory K2 tanker evolved from the original Victor B2 V bomber, which entered service with the Royal Air Force in October 1961. The first K2 flew at Woodford on the 1st of March 1972. It had a crew of 5 and was powered by 4 Rolls-Royce Conway turbofans of 2,600 pound thrust each. It had a maximum speed of 640 miles per hour, Mach 0.92 at 40,000 feet, a ceiling of 59,000 feet and a range of 3,500 miles. Victor K2s were used in the Falklands War, flying over 3,000 hours and making over 600 air refueling stops from the Asteron Islands in support of the Falklands, North Wales, Hurricanes and Harriets. They also flew in the Gulf War, refueling the aircraft.